You are listening to the Enormocast.
If there's one name associated with sending and mind-bending, it's Chris Kalous.
Cut. I don't think anyone's gonna buy that, dude.
Well, it's been a hard week. I just thought I'd bump you a little, bro.
Thanks, buddy. But let's stick to the script, okay?
All right, roll it again. But remember, I love you, dude.
I love you too.
If there's one name associated with sending and mind-bending, it's Adam Ondra. And now, Sportiva has released the latest in its grand parade of legendary climbing shoes, the Ondra Comp. Developed step by meticulous step by the man himself, Adam Ondra. Second skin fit.
Skin to skin.
Rubber everywhere for all types of hooks, heels, and viral reels. Unparalleled smearing and grip performance for those giant volumes, but with outstanding support even on the smallest holds indoors and out. How does the Ondra Comp do it? Well, if you have to ask, you'll never know. But it is a valid question, don't get me wrong. The best idea is to slip into a pair yourself, leap at the wall like a parkour kitten, and feel those Ondra vibes. Check out Sportiva.com or your favorite gym pro shop for the Ondra Comp and the endless innovation from your friends at Sportiva.
Do you hear that? Do you know what that sound is? Well, while you and your crew scuttled off to the shade for some burns on the proj like so many mole rats, your rack of post-send libations, or sad sack failure drinks as the case may be, are sitting in your increasingly scolding rig feeling the heat. And no, that Whole Foods foil cooler bag they guilted you into buying is not going to cut it. Luckily for you and your friends, Yeti has the answer for day trippin' sippin', the Roadie 15 cooler. Yeti's most compact hard-sided cooler, the Roadie 15 has a slim shape for behind the seat or getting tucked in with the gear, but still ample room inside for cold drinks and vittles for yet another best day ever at the crag. And of course, the Roadie 15 cooler is built by Yeti, so it will last practically until the burning orb in the sky goes supernova and vaporizes everything and everyone. Let's just hope you've sent the proj by then. Am I right there, One Hang Johnny? So do yourself and your thirsty friends a favor and level up your après grimpe with a Yeti Roadie 15 cooler by going to Yeti.com to find your local Yeti dealer. And remember, gifting a Roadie 15 cooler to your best bud this holiday season just means more cold send beers for you, too.
Listen, where are you playing in town? You playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
big
big
house. We
place
sold
that
it
side
out.
of town. That's a
Very
big
nice.
place. You sold
What's
it
that,
out.
20,000
seats.
You really should.
The hell are you doing?
I couldn't sleep. I'm checking the ropes. There was a frayed end on your rope, and I'm cutting it out.
Bad weather. No, later, anytime. Fine.
Today's show is brought to you by Black Diamond Equipment, La Sportiva, and with support from Maxim Ropes. Maxim has been keeping the Enormocast off the deck since 2012.
And now, we can also thank the chill folks at Yeti. And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enormo at checkout to get a great deal on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is November 24th, 2024, about 9:45 here in Colorado. And this is episode 297 of the Enormocast, a conversation with alpinist, ice climber, proud Midwesterner, Paul Kuenn, also known as PK, also known as the Dairylander. Paul Kuenn is a legend in upper Midwest and lower Canadian ice climbing around Lake Superior. That's right, some Midwest love here on the Enormocast. Not even a transplant, not even a guy who used to live there. PK is deep in it still. in the upper Midwest, upper Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, a homeboy. And I've been sitting on this one since last February. I talked to PK up in Michigan at the Michigan Ice Festival up there in Munising on the UP. And, got to be summertime, and I thought, well, let's not put out a podcast about ice climbing in the middle of summer. But now Bill up there at the Michigan Ice Fest has invited me back this year. So I'll be making an appearance at the Michigan Ice Fest, and I thought it's a perfect time to put out this interview with Paul Kuenn. If you guys are tuning in from the Midwest and are interested in the Michigan Ice Festival, next year, 2025, it begins on February 12th, runs through February 16th. Of course, you can go to michiganicefest.com for information, tickets, all that sort of thing. I will be there. Not sure what exactly my official duties will be, other than attending the long-running Chris Kalous dance party. Yes, the dance party is named after me. It's a long story. It's been ongoing for several years. I was there for the first time last year. I will be in attendance once again. Probably do some other stuff, but I'll be hanging around. Maybe ice climbing. Once again, that's February 12th through the 16th. Go to michiganicefest.com for information. Oddly, or maybe ironically, considering my ice climbing resume, I used to ice climb. I've climbed some shit back in the day. But nevertheless, ironically, I will be attending at least 2 ice fests this winter, maybe 3. Likely going to show up at Ouray. I haven't been to that in any official duty, maybe ever, actually. But it's kind of in my backyard, so I head down there. But also, I'm going to be going to the Winona Ice Fest in Winona, Minnesota. Look that one up, too. I'll talk a little bit more about that one later. But yeah, I think these folks think it's funny to invite the Enormocast to these ice festivals. It's the height of comedy. But of course, I have these roots in the Midwest. Grew up in the north suburbs of Chicago. Was born in northern Wisconsin. So yeah, I got my roots there. I can handle it. I can mostly handle it. I can handle the drinking. That's for sure. All right, let's get to my interview with Paul Kuenn. PK, as he's well known in the Midwest, is probably one of the more influential climbers that you've never heard of. Unless, of course, you climb in the UP, upper Midwest ice climber, that kind of thing. But Paul's been all over the place, and I didn't expect that. I thought we were going to talk about climbing along the shore of Lake Superior, get a little bit of Midwest ice climbing history, which is, I think, relatively unknown outside of the region. But man, this conversation went all over the place. We touched on so many different little historical pieces, right? He knew and worked for Jeff Lowe in his heyday. He was around when they were first putting out tri-cams. Paul was pivotal in the development of the AMGA. And then just so many ascents all over North America, South America, just embedding him in the history of climbing. Then, of course, if you're from the Midwest and you're an ice climber, which still I think is a pretty small group of people who developed that ice climbing up there on the shore of Lake Superior, then, of course, PK is a legend. And if you go to Michigan, you'll rub elbows with this guy and you'll walk away just scratching your head about how this guy got so much stuff done and survived and still loves it as much as anybody. So I hope you dig this one. A fun conversation with the Dairylander, Mr. Paul Kuenn.
Sharp tools in your hands, spikes on your feet, screws racked on your waist. Ice climbing is metal. Black Diamond's ice collection has everything you need to send this winter, including the newly released Black Diamond Hydra, the most versatile ice tool ever made. This winter, point to Hydra at whatever mountain objective you have and hold on. Because with its integrated component exchange system, the Hydra becomes a customizable winter weapon for any and all cold nightmares you can imagine. Swap out weights, picks, and accessories on the head of this monster, and you'll be ready for whatever stands in your way. From pure water ice, mixed climbing, dry tooling, all the way to the peaks of the Himalaya. The Hydra is a many-headed beast that can send it all. So this winter, you can run away scared or you can meet the beast at blackdiamond.com or your local mountain shop. One tool to rule them all. The Hydra from Black Diamond.
Dairyland.
Right.
I created Dairyland Expeditions because of the fact every one of my buds in the guiding industry called me the Dairylander, and that was started by Andy Salters. So when I was being trained to be a guide at North Cascades Alpine School, Andy called me originally PP. I said, no, it's PK. He goes, no, it's Petulant Paul. I was never petulant.
No, you don't seem petulant at all.
No, but somehow he gave that name. So then I said, could you pick something else? And then he just laughed, said, look at how much cheese you put on the table in front of everybody. You are now the Dairylander.
Nice.
And it stuck.
Right. And that's kind of the other thing is, it's like the origin story is always fascinating to me. And like it sounds like you're from like South Milwaukee. Is that right?
Well,
what was your
mostly
right.
North Milwaukee,
Okay.
but most of my friends are all South Milwaukee.
Okay.
And later I met my wife. She was from South Milwaukee,
Right.
but we all met at the pack shop in Waukesha. So this is outside of Milwaukee. And the pack shop was just your hardcore climbing, backpacking, cross-country ski, canoe kayaking shop,
Right.
which there are none of those around anymore. Sad. But she was always doing the windows.
Oh.
So I saw this beautiful blonde in the windows. I just fell in love. But anyways, in the earliest days, again, I was trained as a guide. I didn't come up as a bum climber. I went right to classes to learn rock climbing at Devil's Lake State Park, where I still live. Why?
Like, why? Like, who are you that you were like,
oh, to take a climbing class?
yeah, and just to be a climber?
It's because I always had my own businesses, and I made a lot of money. Even when my dad was in the union in the 70s, I was almost making as much as he was by painting houses.
Okay.
And I know
fellow house painter.
You know what that's like.
Yeah.
But after July 15th, it gets so hot and humid in the Midwest, and the wasps come out of their nests. And I just said, I make enough money up to July 15th, 20th. I'm out of here. And because I was always a big fly fisherman, my grands taught me how to fly fish.
Before it was cool.
I'd jump on a bus because I didn't have a license yet because I was freshman, sophomore in high school. So I'd jump on a bus. Back then, parents just said, well, be safe.
Right.
So, and they knew I was really cool because I always loved the outdoors. I camped all the time. I would drag friends that never came back with me again to do stuff like that. And so I would go straight west, either to Colorado or Montana, further out the wilderness, because my dad was a lithographer at Krieger's, which is a company that did Mother Earth News, a lot of National Geo stuff, and all these beautiful nature. I don't think he did Sierra Magazine, but I think he did the first Outside Mariah, it was called. MRIGA, Outside Mariah. So that was before Outside Magazine out of Chicago. My dad would bring these big 20 by whatever press sheets that would be created into pages. And so we always had these magazines first. So I'd have all these stories read before anything broke out on the news or people even knew about it. And and my dad always pushed books like Jack London on me. Even when I was like 11, I was reading all these Yukon stories. So all I wanted was to see what the mountains were about. And because I was a fisherman, that makes sense. So I'd get on a bus, I'd get dropped off in Telluride or something and just get up in the mountains and hide. And I always did 2-week stints. That was my motto. It had to be 2 weeks to try to forget all the stuff back home. That was just me.
What did you, and we're talking what, late 60s, early 70s?
No, this is 70, mid 70s.
Okay.
Yeah, because I would have been in high school like 73, 74.
Okay.
As a freshman. That's what I told the crowd this morning. I was about to get an F in gym. And thankfully, my gym teacher, who was the wrestling coach, they were the state champions like 12 years in a row. I would get crushed in wrestling. These big guys. I was the smallest kid in the class. I really was. And Pewaukee High School is like 93 kids in that class. And so I'm not doing that. And he said, well, I go past your house at the farm and I see you out cross country skiing every night after school, or I've seen you rowing your boat all the way across Pewaukee Lake when I'm out sailing. He said, what's wrong? I said, I'm not going to get crushed by these guys. He said, I'll come up with something. Would you do it if I came up with something? And then he gives me all these weightlifting things. I'm this scrawny kid, and back then weightlifting equipment was dangerous. You know, you had the and then the slam of this big steel chunks going up and down. And I tried it 2 weeks. I started to bow out and just go hang out reading. And so he said, you know, I'm not going to give you an F, damn it. And so he gave me some gymnastics stuff. And because I was a light, scrawny, skinny, short kid, I could like haul up on the rings. I could do before I knew what a figure 4 was. I was resting all the time on the rings with my foot over my hand. You know, so it's just like, okay, that was cool, but I get bored so fast. And I still do. So I would start not showing up again. And then in the last ditch effort, he goes, okay, you're always outside. He said, I know it's only for seniors and juniors. I take them on a canoe trip every year. And I'm like, but they're all big wrestling guys that follow you. He goes, don't worry. He says, I think you'll be able to, you know, out paddle them, out haul gear. And I'm like, yeah, I'm nowhere near this. I really don't want to do this. He goes, I'll give you an A if you do this. I'm like, okay, my parents would be really happy with that because they don't know it. They didn't check on grades back then. Teachers didn't call up saying, what's wrong with your kid? You know? So I really didn't want to fail. So I said, I'll go with you. So up to Boundary Waters I went. And one day he pulls out this pack that we've been wearing, thinking it was like food. It wasn't. There was webbing for a harness, Swami belt, a gold line rope, the old, you know, nylon braided rope. He anchored to some trees, said, here's your harness, tie the webbing around the waist, and with our hiking boots, up we went. The big kids did not like it. They had a horrible time, and I just scrambled right up. And that was like the first night. So I was maybe on a 10-day trip, I think it was. That was like maybe night 4. That was the first night the big guy said, BK, come over to the fire. And then the first thing out of their mouths were like, how the hell did you get to the top? There were holds here and there, and, you know.
Right.
We didn't even know what a hold was. I grabbed the rock here. And I'd never been good with memory.
Right.
So I just remember stuff that I could grab on. And they're like, no way, man. There's no way you could have pulled yourself up. I said, I have no arm strength. I didn't pull myself up. My hiking boots did it, you know?
Right.
And then I was buds with them all for the rest of the trip. Suddenly they accepted me. So I was like, this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's like a game changer, you know?
Yeah.
But then, because I was into other stuff, especially theater and music, because I sang with the choir and stuff like that. So I didn't think about it till senior year, and that's when my dad found an article saying open to the public. It was a University of Wisconsin rock climbing lesson at Devil's Lake. And I said, geez, yeah, he goes, no, I saw your pictures in the mountains. That is not hiking. Because I did scramble up really steep ridges and stuff to get the hidden lakes because I didn't usually buy a fishing license.
So, you know, we got the painting thing in common. We got being a scrawny little kid in common. We got being, you know, less than perfect in gym class in common. But also I was like one of my big outdoor introductions to like loving outdoors is the Boundary Waters. Because I
kidding.
Yeah, because I grew up in Libertyville, you know, just south of the border there, and yeah, I used to go up there every summer too with a gym teacher actually who ran a course out of our school.
Did you guys ever go to the West End? So we were by Rose Lake, and those are big cliffs.
No, I don't, and that's what I was going to bring up, but I don't think we did because the West Side. No, we would have gone in Brule and those places.
Yeah.
But
so the Ely side.
Yeah, the Ely side. Yeah, exactly.
Ely side. So we went out of Grand Marais.
But, you know, as I become a climber now, I mean, we used to jump off these cliffs that were They seemed very big.
Oh, right. That was the swimmingest time, jumping off cliffs.
Yeah, but they. I mean, I think about I'm like, there was rocks up there. You know, there were
and you missed them, didn't you?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know whether they were climbing worthy, but I know that they're up there.
Most of them were very smooth.
Yeah, and also very
with
mossy.
Huge lichen.
Yeah, the lichens.
Big potato chip lichen. Yeah,
those things. But it's just fascinating that was in the 70s. This guy had you climbing up there. That's pretty cool.
To this day, I've tried to look him up. I can't find him. But George McComb, if your kids or whoever's probably grandkids listen to this podcast, say hi to George McComb in Maine, because I know he moved to Maine.
Well, my guy was Wally Sitz.
Cool. You remember the name.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, no, he was the most, maybe outside my parents, one of the most influential people in my life. Yeah. For sure.
Very cool.
Because he put me on this path of not just outdoor stuff. I mean, he wasn't a climber, because I didn't know what that was. But he was a real minimalist as well in the outdoors. He was very much into minimizing gear and
cool.
Not quite survival level, but he knew all that stuff, and he would kind of turn us on to it a little bit. So we'd go up, even up there, we'd have a camp set up, and you'd have the day, and we'd go out and build a shelter and try to start a fire with the fire bow and all those sorts of things.
Wow, that was way out there.
Just adventure, the idea that you're out there, because his minimalist attitude was about adventure, about the less stuff you have,
make it an adventure.
the more connected you are, and the more exciting it is. And I don't know if I took that to climbing, but climbing came out of that desire to go and see what's out there and what's on top of that and everything. And I think it's really cool that fly fishing was that for you.
Because,
it was, because it was. I mean, fly fishing is a super, in the last 20 years or whatever. Or maybe 30.
It's gone through a cycle.
Yeah, it became this rich guy's thing, but it was always, before that, it was always just fishermen and anglers that would just do it on and make the gear.
But Orvis made it a rich man's thing.
Yeah.
So when my Gramps just took this, he was always just fly casting.
Mm-hmm.
But out of this good old tube, he pulls this bamboo rod with this ancient fly thing and goes, I think you'd just because he knew I was restless.
Right.
This will keep me standing and casting in the boat instead of wiggling on the seat.
Right.
I think that's probably why.
It's so funny because that was exactly, I hated fishing in Wisconsin.
It was
sitting
very
in a boat.
boring otherwise.
I hated it. Perch fishing with a bobber. It's I did that for 10 minutes.
I didn't want to wait anymore.
But I got into fly fishing too
there you go.
in college and I was like, this is so much more fun. It's you're doing something. You're not just sitting there waiting for your little thing to move. Which is why I also don't ice fish.
By age 10, I had made this big wood cutout. My mom was a professional rosemaler, which is Norwegian flower type of. So she taught us how to do scrolly kind of painting. So I made this beautiful fly. And I sold flies off the road because we had 26 lakes around us.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, everybody would stop in, and this 10-year-old would come out with my plastic bin full of flies, and I made money off it.
Nice. That's awesome. Oh, well, let's get back to the climbing.
Yeah.
Because really we're here to talk about ice climbing. And so here you are, you became a rock climber. You got some training at Devil's Lake. I mean, how extensive besides this beginner's course?
Well, it was a 2-part course, so beginner and more advanced. So that way you'd learn anchoring.
Mm-hmm.
You'd start out, it was a weekend. Each one was a weekend at Devil's Lake, but previous to that, it was 3 weeks, 1 night a week at a bank upstairs, and you were belaying across the floor doing belay races. So this is back hip belay, and also how to belay through a figure 8.
Okay.
They also taught us stitch plates, too.
Yeah, that was kind of new.
Yeah.
Brand new, yeah.
Yeah, so, you learned a ton of stuff indoors. So when you showed up at the lake, it was go. And these guys, one who I got very close to because he worked at the pack shop that I later managed, Bobby Stricker, I haven't seen him forever. I remember him getting arrested going in with all white into St. Helens the winter after the explosion. And he skied in, and they obviously saw his tracks, so they just went and picked him up. He couldn't get away, but he did get arrested for that. I remember that because I ran into him. He worked for Yak Works, the old backpack company, and MSR. So I would visit him in downtown Seattle. That was 81, 82. Then I lost track of him. But incredible climber, 5'4". And by then I had, end of sophomore year, I just like ripped out of my clothing.
Oh, really?
I went up to 6'2" instantly.
Right on.
So it hurt. I mean, every joint hurt and everything. But so now suddenly I'm way taller than Bobby.
Right.
But Bobby he'd say, no, this what I do, you're not going to be able to do. So it was a learned thing that, he taught me right away that we're not equal, even if we're the same strength, that you're going to find a different hold than I can do. So that was really cool of him to really push that. Kind of what Jeff Lowe did when he said, no, don't slam the tool in, watch this. And he just like hooked and went up. I'm like, oh boy, can I do that up here? Because I had already been climbing in the, way below zero ice up here, and down there, your 30 below zero is done by like 6 a.m. Then it skyrockets to 20 all the time. So I wasn't sure I could do that kind of stuff back here, but he taught me how to dance up, and that was by a freak chance that because I was working construction and they needed someone to always come early and do certain things, and Lowe was they were just putting a building up, or he was going to rent that building or something. It wasn't his, but
where was this?
I was living in Niwot when it was one bar and two. We were the first condos I built.
Oh, right. Out by Boulder.
Yeah. Or I didn't build those, but I got in with the builders and started to build elsewhere when I moved to Colorado. But so is it Fayette or something like that?
Yeah.
Just south of there. But yeah, he was going to rent a place because he was just, at that point, it would have been with the Tricams. He needed more space for sewing and all that kind of stuff because the Tricams came from camp, but no webbing on them.
Okay.
So they sewed the webbing on. And he's like, geez, you're the only guy that shows up. And he recognized me from the shows in Chicago and Minneapolis that we would go to for the pack shop. I couldn't believe he recognized. He goes, no, we've talked about it. I know you're an ice climber. He says, this is a really shitty day. Obviously, you're the only guy that's showing up in a snowstorm. Let's go climbing. And my jaw dropped because this is my hero.
Right.
Because if I had that ice experience book with me, I would have said, could you sign it? So that one day experience, I learned so much about not bashing. I came from the alpine climbing group, right? Up in North Cascades. So you always were bashing to get through crappy stuff to get to real ice. And so that just like, wow, did that turn me around. I was a lot heavier. I mean, I had more muscle mass. I had just got done with the Pacific Crest Trail. I took time off because I did a bunch of hard, scary climbs. And a buddy said, let's go do the Crest Trail. I know you always want to do it. He heard me talk about it all through high school. And I said, okay. But I had planned on always doing it by myself. And that's from the National Geo book that my dad had given me in 75 or 76. And of course, day one, he left. He didn't like it. So I did the rest all by myself. But I was writing for the Milwaukee Journal. So there's the heat was on, right? Because I couldn't just bow out like my buddy did. It's like I'm writing for the Waukesha Freeman, the Milwaukee Journal. I got to keep going. And I loved it. I mean, it was awesome. But anyway, so after that year off, I was just starting to get back into climbing and stuff. And then I did a lot of hard stuff in the Canadian Rockies. I mean, there are weird stuff because I'm the only guy known to do a solo of the North Face Athabasca in the buff.
I see now. I gotta just put the brakes on.
Coflax
I think
only.
The listeners right now are like, wait. There was like 20 different things that he just dropped that need to be explored. Like literally.
I was having fun.
Yeah. So let's this naked Athabasca thing. We'll get back to. So you went out west. It sounds like you were in the Cascades, and I mean.
Yeah, that was 79, 80.
Okay, so there's a period
80,
between,
right.
Again, the bank and the floor.
Oh, right,
and all that.
learning how to rock
I mean, we
climb.
don't have to do chronicle.
No,
but,
it was chronic. I mean,
Yeah.
I went immediately after that rock climb lesson is when I signed up for that September after that summer playing at Devil's Lake. I signed up for those first, guiding courses at North Cascades for that September. So that was 79, 80. So the 2 separate years because they didn't allow you to do back-to-backs.
Okay.
Because they wanted you to train what you learned the first time.
Where? Like RMI or somewhere like that?
No, this is North Cascades Alpine School.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool.
So Dunham Gooding changed the name to American Alpine Institute.
Oh,
He's
that's
still
what
the
I was
leader.
Thinking of. I wasn't thinking MRI, but yeah.
Yeah. So I knew Dunham, and Dunham helped us create the American Mountain Guides. I was in on the first bunch of guys. I remember trying to get into American Alpine Club back then. You had to give a huge roster of climbs. You know, they didn't let anybody in back then. So I thought I was just lucky to get in on the AAC, let alone the Guides Association. And we were just changing the names because Chenard and the group left us with a very long, like American Professional Mountain, blah, blah, blah. It was 5 letters, and we tried to shrink that down to American Mountain Guides Association. So to meet all these guys and to just jump in right with them, but they knew I had been taught by some of the best guys up in North Cascades Alpine School. And they said, no, share it, and let's keep sharing, and let's pull more guys in. In those early days, like half the group would leave. They'd swear, say a couple F words or whatever, and just leave because they didn't want to change. And we always wanted UIA, whatever sanction, certification, so we could, because we all dreamed of climbing in Chamonix.
Right.
We all wanted a guide in Chamonix, not climb. We wanted a guide in Chamonix. So it was way above our heads. So, so it was.
What did your personal climbing look like in that era?
Well, because I did a bunch of stuff in the North Cascades, thanks to Alan Kearney, who showed me there's tons of untapped stuff. And I was always into doing stuff on my own, but I would find somebody that just, knew or whatever. And just that I always waited to do a little climb with them to see what they were really like, and then they'd say, you want to try this? You want to try that? And then I ended up 82, 83, 84, 85. I think up to 86, I was in the Canadian Rockies 6 weeks straight every summer, which led to that 84 solo.
Okay, so let's do that then. What was like on your tick list up there, and who were you climbing with up there?
Oh, well, I went through a lot of partners because most of them didn't want to do backcountry, like haul the backpack and tent and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of different guys, mainly drawn from guys I met more in the Midwest.
Okay.
Minneapolis or Chicago or whatever. It never really worked out. But one year, I think it was 83, so second year I was up there, we met 2 guys from Colorado, and I told them, hey, I'm just heading that way, but I'm going to try to live out in Washington first. And I was a cross-country ski certified instructor for the PSIA, so I really wanted to go a place like Bend, because they had really awesome, back then it was the Karoo cross-country ski center, but they had no snow that year. So I just wandered all the way back because this Bill Troll and Lenny Miller, hi guys, I know you're out there. They said, hey, you want to go up Athabasca? And I said, I've been up there a bunch of times because I did North Face, the Hourglass, everything I could. And then Lenny and Bill and us went up there, even though there's a big snow. And I said, let's not go down. And they're like, no, let's just go down faster, straight down the Silverdor. I'm like, we just got loaded with snow. We really shouldn't, but okay, I'll go. Let's keep stomping and seeing and stop and talk. And as soon as we dropped down around the corner, huge, 3-4 feet deep by easily 600 yards across, the whole slope goes with Lenny.
Whoa.
Out in front. I was on a separate rope with my partner, Mark. And I just jumped on Bill's shoulder because he was plunging his ice axe, and I just jumped on him because I'm like, Lenny could take you right off because Bill was quite a bit lighter and shorter than Lenny. And we could hear the rope squeaking as it tightened. And I had just read about one of our favorite English guys where it broke at the figure 8 on his harness and he got swept into a crevasse. And Lenny and this avalanche is heading right for this monstrous crevasse at the bottom of the North Face. And we're just leaning on it, and he kept swimming, though. He stayed on top, and he finally came to a stop. And we went down, and those guys got really close to us after we drank a lot that night.
Right.
Ate Lenny's killer hot chili, drank a lot of beers, and then they said, yeah, we're leaving. They were both Coloradans. They didn't like this bad weather stuff. And I'm like, well, it's just getting good. Let the avalanches come off, and there'll be ice runnels. And they're like, no, we're bye. And my buddy Mark, he just like, yeah, no. So then I got really close to Lenny because I went to live with him for a month or so and be his maid, clean up everything. And I was working whatever jobs I could. And that included the construction with Lo. And then it was the next year that Lenny says, let's do something big. Let's like hit everything we can in the Canadian Rockies. I'm like, I've hit a lot of them already. I had already done the Kitchener Couloir. I did something really stupid trying to solo Slipstream. I made it way past halfway until I saw Sirac just come off the top and wipe out everything under his back. So I down climbed the whole damn thing again and walked out. And my buddy watched. He was way down, at the bottom of Glacier bouldering because there's some beautiful boulders on that glacier off of Snowdome. So he was having fun. He goes, I figured you'd come back when I heard that roar. He was right. So anyways, so we go. This would have been 84. We were heading up. Lenny wanted to do the Lotus Flower Tower. He says, we're both really good. We've been practicing in Colorado all year long, doing some good routes and stuff. He says, we can be the first ones to do it free because it still hadn't been freed. And I'm like, cool, that'd be awesome. I love the boonies, And I had already been up to Alaska a bunch of times, in 82 and 83. So I said, yeah, let's go find the pilot. And so anyways, on the way up, Lenny was always a pretty good drinker. I never was. I mean, I could down a lot of beer, but I would quit.
Right.
Stop at one point, just quit. But Lenny would keep carrying on, especially if girls were around. And they were usually drawn to him. So anyways, I don't know if you know the story of the Athabasca Glacier Ranger Station. But back then they had like 10 truckloads of sand brought in to make a beach off of the Kitchener, the stream at the bottom. And they built a sauna. And beautiful girls, these Rangers were just really pretty girls and very butch looking guys that were at the center to talk to people about the glaciers. And they were bored shit, right? I mean, they talked to Japanese, back then it was Japanese before Chinese, and tourists all day long. So they had incredible parties. And we've been up there. I've been up there for years, so I got to know a bunch of them. And then with Lenny and I hanging out for like 3-4 weeks, they got to know us really good. And they're just like, come on over for a party. And there was no one with clothes on, and so much was being drunk. And that's all we did. We got from the sauna, jumped into the freezing cold stream, back in the sauna, and drinking the whole time. And I'm like, Lenny, I want to do Athabasca tomorrow. It's like perfect conditions. It's like 28 in the morning, and it doesn't get above 32 in the afternoon. I mean, we could go shirtless, And he's laughing. And he's like, okay, I'll catch up to you. So I went back and slept, and he came in at like later than that, probably like 3 in the morning. Of course, I'm getting up at 4:35, and I make him follow me. But at the bottom of the North Face, he's like, yeah, ain't gonna happen. I'm gonna go back down. And I'm like, really? Come on, it's perfect. And he's like, nope, because you go do it. He said, you said you'd do it shirtless. As as I'm walking away from him, pretty mad at him. And I get up just past the shrine. I'm sitting, I made myself a little ledge, because it was perfect for, the nice firm snow. So I hadn't put my crampons yet. I even did a little maneuver over the shrund without crampons. And then it's like, okay, now I'm on hard ice. So I sit back, I put my harness on, put my boots on, and my crampons on. And then I'm like, Lenny's right. Like, I'm hot as hell right now. because we went up really fast. That's probably with all the drinking he did, that fast speed that we did to get to the bottom, he was feeling pretty rustled. So anyways, I'm like, I'm hotter than hell. So of course I take my jacket off, my shirt off. I'm like, I'm still. So there I am pulling my Bill Forrest pile pants off. And Lenny's way down below and he's going, what the hell? And out of the pocket. The birdshot is way up there.
Right.
He had handed me his camera to shoot pictures. And out goes the camera. And I just see it in pieces going down. Very nice. That was a little compact 35 millimeter back then. Busting up. I'm like, damn it. Now I owe him big time. But it's like, oh, well. I stripped all the way down. You know, I kept the harness on in case I'd have to wrap, because I always carried a rope. No matter what I did, I always had my rope with me in case I wanted to wrap and get the hell out of there. And that's all I had was my helmet, my harness, and my boots and crampons on. And gloves.
Right.
And I climbed up, and Lenny said I had to time it right. He said you can't leave after this certain point because he knew all the people would be on their telescopes at the center looking up at Athabasca. I don't think you could see that clearly from those, but that was the joke, because you had to do it between like 9 and 10 in the morning when all those buses pull up. Well, this is like the sun's just coming up and I'm already at the top in like an hour. So I kind of wrecked the whole story. You know, it's like, damn it. But man, when I topped out on that Cordis Ridge, I was cold fast in the wind. So I put my clothes on really fast. I'm getting down because I got to keep moving. I'm freezing now. And of course, I made it down. Lenny had gone back to the campground. But again, bless his heart, my buddy, he knew where we had to get pinched together to jump over a creek. And there were 2 beers right there for me.
Nice.
To come down. Of course, I couldn't drink it without it. So I brought both bottles all the way back to camp and made him drink it with me. He's like, it's not as cold now. I'm like, that's right. I said, you're the one who tempted me to do that.
So what did that have to do with Lotus Flower Tower?
We were on the way.
Oh, you were on, but
we
that
kept
was it.
getting sidetracked.
That was as far as you got.
So you know, like within a couple of days, the weather after that was. So this is the start of the bizarre summers that we had never seen before, where it just stayed warm. And so, I had already with my buddy did. The guys up here say I did a first ascent, but I don't think it's a rib near George Lowe's or Greg Lowe, can't remember which of the Lowe, that did North Twins.
Okay.
But I'm like, no, I wasn't really North Face, because I did the rock rib furthest to the left when you're looking at it. And it was, you got to a steep snow rib right away. It was maybe 2,000 feet of rock. And then the rest was all ice and snow. So I say no. That was not a North Face route at all, because I mean I really cheated.
Yeah, but
I
it's
got
still
on that ridge and went up.
I know, but it's still the North Twin.
I know it was a big climb, bigger than we thought. Believe me, we were very. I would have been 1982. So yeah, so 22 about. But I was still not thinking right. Because, I mean, it was the next year that I was trying to do Denali, right? So I wasn't thinking right at all.
What do you mean by that?
You know, trying to solo or just push stuff differently.
Right.
You know, and my buddy who was climbing with me was not that good. So I should not have had him on that, because he was worried the whole time. He shouted a lot of obscenities to me all the time. He let me know how he felt every which way.
Right.
But it was a safe route. The limestone was awesome. I didn't know that existed because I'd already done the bottom part of Edith Cavell, and I knew that was all quartzite. So I just thought the whole bottom range was quartzite, but it wasn't always. And I didn't know my geology quite that good back then. So I still might have some stuff wrong, but so Lenny and I go, okay, he knew that I had tried Edith Cavell a couple of years before that. So he goes, let's do it. It's like incredible weather. It's cold overnight. And by the time we're at the top, if it's warm, who cares? So we get there, and suddenly Lenny goes, you did that solo without me 2 weeks ago, or whatever, a week ago. And he's like, let's just do this solo. Well, that wasn't in the plan here. When I have a partner and a good partner, I want to be on a rope. If nobody's around, that's when I just thought I was cool and would just go solo something.
Mm-hmm.
That takes me back to Bridal Veil Falls and the Fang, too. I couldn't find anybody. But I thought it was a piece of cake. I mean, I thought it was easier than here, just looking at it. And I buzzed up the Rigid Designator in like 20 minutes and did the Fang back to back. And everybody goes, you shit me? And go, yeah, here's the pictures. And I took a picture between my legs looking down, with the rope, because I always had the rope hanging from my harness in case I wanted to back off.
Right.
And so on this one, Lenny's insisting that I solo. And I'm like, okay. And so we're kind of on that big wall at the bottom. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I forgot. Chenard soloed this.
And so you're on Edith
And if
Cavell.
he could do this.
Is that where we're at now? Okay, cool. I lost the
yeah,
train.
okay, sorry. Yeah, we're on Edith Cavell. And Lenny's telling us that we have to solo. I'm like, that's not what this partner thing's about.
Right.
We have a rope and gear. I want to play some gear. He's like, no, let's just solo it. We can use the gear up high. So I'm like, damn it.
So you remembered Chenard soloed it.
Yeah, and I'm like, and they had crappy boots. We're not wearing rock shoes. We got our double boots on, And I'm like, yeah, this is what I learned in. I learned in Vask Hiker 2s. I thought I could do anything in those. So up we went. And Lenny, I said, well, I'm not soloing this unless I'm way away from you. Because others, it's not a solo. I have to feel alone and committed. And Lenny's like, whatever. So I go hundreds of yards, whatever, away from him and start up a different part of the face. And I'm like almost at the top of that face before you hit the Angel Glacier. And suddenly I hear some rock crumbling, and here's Lenny coming at me. I'm like, I told you we weren't supposed to be climbing together, He goes, I'm just trying to pick a good route. I'm like, so I have these awesome photos of him doing these long reaches on overhangs with this pack and double boots, pulling these really cool rock moves. To this day, I send it, like every year we toss each other pictures and we said, were we this stupid? We thought we could do this, but we did. And then when we got up higher, a group had really gone fast up the glacier, the normal route, and got ahead of us. And rockfall, they were like, it looked like they were clearing ledges with a shovel. I'm like, really? We shouted. They had yelled back, so they knew we were down there. And we said, okay, we know how good we are now. And we just buzzed fast. I'm doing rope work, placing gear, but I think we were simul climbing a little bit, but we just buzzed right past them to get away from that danger. Like, what the hell? Are these Canadian climbers? Is that how they are? I didn't know that many Canadian, so I shouldn't have said that. But anyways, they were. It turned out they were, because when we got even with them, we yelled something appropriate to them. But it was nice. It was like, you gotta be more careful. You almost killed us with the rock fall. And then we got to the top, and it was awesome. It was like, wow, we pulled, so it wasn't a full solo. I mean, we roped up on the upper rock buttress. I think it may be because of the rock fall.
Right.
We were just like, damn it. And then you have to cross that really thin ice on top of shale. And of course, Lenny goes, okay, your turn. He goes, you're better at the ice. Go for it. And I was like, but there's no bro I can put. Thanks, Lenny. He goes, just pretend we were soloing again. But he had a bomb-proof anchor. So I went for it.
So let me ask you this, because I mean, I'm in a whole different interview than I thought I was in. No, that's fine. It's fine, because we haven't even gotten back to climbing ice in Wisconsin or in Michigan or in Minnesota or what, Ontario? Is that what's up there? Anyway,
yep.
I mean, this whole thing of like, this reminds me of a phrase that I don't know if he coined, but it's on the podcast with Kelly Cordes, disaster style, which is like he defined as like you just, you basically just go until it's too hard to go down, and that means you're gonna probably finish.
Oh, see, no, yeah. I always thought all that stuff out way ahead of time. I did not like that thought at all.
Yeah, but I mean, you're throwing out solos that I think probably for the day were pretty impressive.
But they felt so I mean, when you climb up here, and I learned my whole first year pushing hard was at Devil's Lake. I get out there and I'm like trying to drag guys that said, yeah, man, 5'10", whatever. I'm like, no, this is a 5'8". Or we didn't have that back then. In the original book, it was F.
Yeah.
So I said, no, this is an F7 or F8. This is not a 5'10" or whatever you call this. Because I had already been to Yosemite, because I climbed after while I was on the Pacific Crest Trail. Some guys bet me I couldn't beat them with their horseback to the top of Tioga Pass or something on the other side of Yosemite. Mm-hmm. And I beat them by like 2 days, and I left a note for them at where we get our packages up at Tuolumne Meadows post office, and I left a note for them because I said I would if I beat them.
Right.
And it turned out to be 2 days, but I was willing to hang out because they promised me they'd take me climbing because I didn't have my gear with me, and they'd take me climbing up something hard. I didn't know it was going to be triple direct.
Really?
I'd never done anything that big.
Well, there isn't anything that big, almost.
It was like, oh my God! But we did not make it to the summit.
Okay.
We only got like halfway, and then a big storm was coming in. They were smart enough. They're like, no, we're getting down, and I'm like, that's all right, because you already almost scared the shit out of me already a couple of times on some of these swings and stuff like that. It was like pretty wild. But anyway, so after learning at Devil's Lake,
or half a triple direct in borrowed gear.
Yeah. I mean, it was really. They had really nice stuff. Oh, okay. These guys had a lot of money. That's probably why they had pack horses, and stuff like that. So, but obviously they were good climbers. They knew what they were doing. Yeah. I trust them right away because just from what we talked about when I hung out with them, when I was packing my stuff into my backpack and they were getting ready for their horseback journey. And I knew enough already in just that first month of the PCT that anyone early season has very slow horses because the horses aren't ready yet because they don't like stumbling, especially if there's a little snow on the trails. So I knew I could beat them. So it was a total setup on my because I really wanted to go climbing, especially in Yosemite, So anyways, yeah. So long story short, after you've climbed at Devil's Lake, you go anywhere in the world. I've climbed France and England and Scotland and Nepal. I mean, the friction, you just freak out. My foot sticks.
Right.
It sticks to this rock. It will not at Devil's Lake State Park unless you're on like a dime thick edge.
Right.
So I always thought that stuff was really easy.
Well, what about the ice? What about solo in the ice?
After climbing up here, I thought everything was easier because the temperature, I wasn't at 29 below zero with the wind freezing. The wind off of this lake, I mean, yeah, back then, it was always iced out miles out.
Right.
But the dampness still that rode over that ice would create fogs at way below zero and then sweep up that phase. So everything, once I moved out west, it's like, you guys don't even know what climate's like. I would tease them all the time. Like, yeah, right, you're Wisconsinite. And I just let it lie there because I'm like, yeah, you're right. I'm just from Wisconsin.
It reminds me of the ice skiers from the Northeast.
Oh, right.
Yeah, who can edge on like bullet ice.
Go up to Vermont to northern New York, and after a good rainstorm, after a new snow, you see how graceful your turn is.
Right. So this is all like. I mean, I had no idea about any of this, of your past, like, as far as that.
It's only coming out nowadays because people are finding out through friends or I don't know how it gets out.
I mean, some of these things that you're doing.
Because I never wrote about it.
Right. But I mean, like, that wasn't, because I ice climbed back, but this would have been the end of the 80s or like 90.
So when they started
90s.
to put the little curve in the
Not
handle,
yet.
still was straight.
Yeah.
Okay. I can't
my
remember
tools were
when
straight.
that break was.
I kind of stopped.
But didn't you say you had the Simone Chicale?
No, I had X15s.
Oh, you had X. Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So, and it was like either time for me to retool or stop. But also, I moved to Southern California. But this isn't about me. But the point is that I mean, even when I started at the end of the 80s, like the rigid designator, the Fang, when it came in, because it was before they would farm it, didn't always come in. Like those
they really farm it?
Well, they started hanging a rope on it.
Because I just passed it last week,
right.
and it's like these look like really different.
No, they're I mean, it depends. Though it's warmer now too.
Oh, because of the warmth.
Yeah, but
that's
they also
probably why they're so beefy.
I mean, they hung a rope on it and stuff just to help it get started.
To start it.
Yeah, so. But nevertheless, they were considered pretty serious still, even when I was climbing in the late 80s. So it must have been.
According to my friends,
wild.
they were very mad at me when
right.
I came back. They said you shouldn't be doing that shit.
Right.
So I felt really bad because Frank, who I was living with, he was an EMT and stuff, and on the rescue team. He was also on the National Spelunking Rescue Team, so he had to deal with cavers getting stuff. So I did. He was mad at me, and I felt bad.
Okay.
You know, but I'm like, I don't write about this shit.
Right.
I knew I could do it. You know, don't blame me. I knew it would be fun.
The interesting thing
though,
is
it was
that
awesome. It was so fun because it wasn't frickin' freezing.
Yeah. And then when you get, I mean, you get this is this era that's legendary, and it still exists, but not to the same extent of never falling anyway. Like, and that's kind of the thing. And I always used to think about that. Like, if I didn't stop and place all these screws, this would be a hell of a lot easier. Right. And I'm not going to fall anyway.
Right.
If you know, hell or high water.
You don't want to fall with crampons on.
Yeah, I'm still not going to fall. So I did always have that contemplation of like, I'm pumped because I'm placing screws. And if I wasn't placing screws, it would be safer in this way because I would probably have less chance
think
of
back
falling.
then when we had snargs and
Chenards.
Yeah,
I had snargs, dog.
So
I was a snarg guy.
The Chenards, you had to place 3 times.
Right.
Because the first 2 would pucker out all the ice. And finally the hole was deep enough that at least it would start going in. And of course, the ratchet only worked out here where the ice was softer.
Right.
Back here, it was way too cold, so you still had to use your whole ice axe and just
Yep. The low rat.
So it was so pumpy.
Right.
So when I started to play doing little solos here, I was comfortable with this harder ice and stuff, and a lot of it was overhanging because of that splashback. If you were doing a low thing, you were down near the Kirby bottoms just for practice. And so it is a solo, but the longest climb I ever did in my life was a mile long, like an hour and a half. My wife timed it, but Mosquito Beach, the face of the ice volcanoes is always overhung slightly.
Where's that?
So there's Mosquito Beach and Chapel Beach, kind of where people go out to HMR.
Okay.
So that beach, that bay,
Munising,
always has this huge swerving face of ice where the push stopped, and then it's flat pan ice after that. And it's up to 15, 20 feet above the water from the splashing. And one time I did the whole traverse all the way across nonstop. And I was pumped because I wasn't allowed like stepping onto like a crack where you could do, you know, a step into the snow and rest.
Right.
That was verbatim. You know, I mean, not verbatim, verboten.
Yeah.
Verboten. So my old German, ich bin Bergsteiger, ja. So anyways, so I mean, I was comfortable doing long, hard stuff.
Yeah.
And that was with those old tools. I have to keep reminding people, this is with my La Prade ice axe and a Hummingbird tool.
Right. The Hummingbirds were
I think that's the only reason
Ferraris,
Jeff
though.
thought I was a cool guy, because he knew I loved the foot fangs because it changed our lives.
Yeah, see, I was a foot fan guy. I was at the end of that, too.
I mean, I think he brought that out in 80, 81, 82, somewhere in there right when I was starting. So as soon as I got up here and started playing the harder stuff, I'm like, I'm buying those, man, because I'm sick of kicking and bashing all my icicles away.
So let's talk about like I mean, you came back, and so it's like it's interesting because there's so much of the exodus of climbers from the Midwest that go out west, and then they stay out west, and you know.
Yeah.
But I think it's a little bit interesting that you still always kept this place as sort of your roots, and then
thanks to Reagan.
Oh yeah,
As soon as Reagan came into office, within 3 years, all the guys making the biggest cash IBM were all out of work.
Right.
So suddenly you got all these engineers. Lenny made it through, but half the engineers from IBM Store Tech were all working flipping burgers. So it was bad. And my buddies and I, because I was a builder, I was helping, and they were into early green building, trying to keep airtight and all that kind of stuff. So that's where I picked up on it much later. But we were building condos just for quick money. Those guys had a bunch of builds and a lot of money spread out. I put all my money into the one because I thought I'd live in it for a while. And then this crash came. So something that I think we were putting in like $40,000 to build it. God knows what that condo goes for now. It's probably millions.
Yeah.
Because it was just outside of Niwot.
Right.
And then the crash came and everyone's out of work. And I'm just like, because I was guiding for different companies, like in Eldo, that was Paul Sibley.
Right.
But you're on a roster and you had the old landlines. We didn't have cell phones. So the calls would go out because they needed a family shows up. They want a guide. And if you weren't home, you missed it. And it went to the next guy. They just kept doing a cycle. So
you were never home.
He probably had like 100 guides working for him, but how many days did those guys work for him, really? Because I always wanted to work. I always liked to pay bills on time. It's the Midwest thing. And when everything crashed, I had like 25 cents left by the time I got from paying gas. By the time I got to Illinois, that's when you hit the first toll road. And the woman I just come up to her and go, what do I do? I don't want to use my Visa. And she just hands me an envelope. Says, no, you can just send in the fee. I'm like, oh, think I can make it home now. Because I was still hanging out. When I'd come home briefly, I'd always stay at my parents'. So I knew from that point in Illinois, because I had a Renault car, an R5, a great mountain car, right? I got stuck a lot. But anyways, I made it home on I had 20, I think it was 28 cents in my pocket. And I said, all the people I met that wanted me to guide for them for these different companies, they're all from Detroit, Chicago, Minneapolis. I'm like, why am I living on like this very expensive territory when I could be by my ice cream, my cheese, and Lake Superior, which I loved. I just love kayaking and canoeing and stuff. And I just I want to see water again. This dry crap out west is not for me. Plus, I never liked the sun beating down on me. I climbed a lot in the desert with Lenny. I just after 5 days, I had to hide in the shade.
Right.
Just sit my head in the Colorado River to cool down. So anyways, it was because of that I was forced to go back and forced to think about how am I going to guide the whole drive. I'm just like, I can do this. Because I knew a lot of shops, because when I would come home, I'd give slideshows. Mm-hmm. There were no REIs, but there were a lot of mountaineering shops in the Midwest back then, that had climbing gear and backpacking stuff. And they already from the early 80s liked my slideshows. So in the tail end, 84, 85, when all this came down in Colorado, I just hightailed it back for I loved the most, especially my Devil's Lake. Believe it or not, I was missing no friction.
Right.
What's wrong with that? So anyways, when I moved back, and right away, and at that point is when I was starting to make calls, and because in 86, 87 is when we really got together to create what we called the American Mountain Guide Association. Mm-hmm. So I knew all that was developing. I said, I'm jumping in. I'm going to be at the top of my chart, and I'm going to create this in the Midwest. And somehow I did. But a lot thanks to Outside Magazine, because that was out of Chicago. They had known me from something, maybe in my stories in the papers, whatever. But they called up and said, let's do a story. So I got all this free press from every newspaper. So right away, I was still teaching a lot of canoeing and stuff and kayaking because rock climbing still wasn't that big. I said, I can make this work.
So what years were this? What year was this?
So that would have been 85, 86.
Right.
Is when I moved back. And
because that's a trip, because I always just say, like, there was no, it's like I didn't have any exposure to climbing because I was here in the north suburbs.
Right.
And I didn't know about Devil's Lake.
Yeah, there were no gyms, nothing like that.
Yeah. But outside was also one of my outlets to find out about it, reading articles in there and stuff like that. So,
sure.
Sure.
But
so the name was Dairyland. Was that the name of it?
Well, that was a very dumb call on my part because everyone out west called me the Dairylander. And my buddies, when I came back home, they said, yeah, welcome back. Cool. What are you going to do? And I said, believe it or not, I'm going to try to start I also had what was called Midwest Mountain Images because I was a good photographer and I knew people liked me, for slideshows. So I said, maybe I can do this professionally and charge instead of just trying to get people to come over to me to guide, And I did. I got this, like even the Chicago Museum of Science had me come and do slideshow. So suddenly I'm like, cool, that's working. So the guide thing's got to work, right? And it was tough, though, because even with all this press, how many calls do you really get after a story?
Right.
So not enough to keep money pouring in. So I was still doing, labor, kind of. I was still building or landscape and whatever I could in between. And then I also miss Jude, who we had dated beforehand a couple of times. And I had enough with the women out west. And she had enough back home. We were just sowing our oats back then. And so in 87, she was a great cross-country skier, So it's like we'd done the Berkey together, things like that. And so like, well, what do you think? And she says, well, I want to buy a house. And that was in 86, 87. And I said, well, I can rebuild it. I can do whatever you want, But it's got to be really cheap because I'm trying to pay back a big loss because I came back with nothing. And she said, well, let's see. And in 88, so I'd known her for 8 years, almost 9, 79, 80, I think I met her. We finally got married in 88. So yay, it worked out. And she was a big inspiration. She was a graphic designer, so she made my brochures really cool, cooler than the others that you saw at shops when you went to retail shops, My guiding brochure was better than theirs. Color pictures and everything. So I always was lucky with everyone I met. I was just always in the right place at the right time. So thanks to all of them. Unfortunately, many are gone now.
Right.
So. And yeah, coming back here nobody was teaching ice climbing, of course. Still, even in 87, nobody was really teaching it. So I'm like, well, I had plenty of people keeping me busy in the early days. So why not? And so back then, this turnabout, our turnabout right here at the lake right behind us, that was the Voyager Inn. The road kind of narrowed and made just a turn. So that whole area behind the dog patch was the Voyager Inn. And I had known him since like 81, 82 when I started bringing people up. And he's like, well, you got a cabin anytime you want. Really cheap, too. And they were pretty depressing in there. They were from like the 40s,
right.
30s or 40s. So, but we'd have like 5 people because Jude would come up. She would ski, or sometimes she'd go out climbing, but usually she would ski while I'm teaching. And it was a great time because I had income constantly coming in. I proved it would work, but then it started to get too big for me. And thanks to, I think it was Mr. Mayfield, who joined our AMGA. He was opening like the first huge rock gym in Oakland. Isn't that the one you worked at?
No, I was down in L.A.
Oh, you were in L.A. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. But I think that was the first real biggie.
Yeah.
And he's coming to the storyline every AMGA member time we got together every fall. And he's like, you have to do the gym thing. That's the future. And I'm like, I hate inside. But there's nothing like that in Wisconsin, nothing anywhere near. Chicago, I think at that point had one. And at the same time in 95, a younger friend who I was teaching there, it wasn't a really first responder course, but it was kind of outdoor rescue kind of stuff down in Bloomington at Upper Limits.
Right.
Chris. And I'm like, they're trying to make it work. They were just opening 95. He was still digging out the crud out of those giant grain towers in 95 with wheelbarrows. Thousands of tons of dead pigeons and bats. I mean, unbelievable. I said, if they can do it, I can do it. And I'm a builder. I can do it all myself, And I had engineering friends because I said, if I'm doing this, I'm doing it right. So I'm the only guy ever known to have cracks. Of course, they fit my hands because I made them that way. But you could place pro in and fall.
Oh, wow.
I made them bomb-proof. So they were cementatious with lots of blends. So I've been in construction a long time. I knew how to play. So it was called Vertical Stronghold. So it was the first indoor climbing gym for the public. My buddy down in Milwaukee had an indoor gym at the Turner's Club, but it was for the Turner's kids and stuff. And so I was really the first open to the public. And the guys in Madison couldn't stand that I pulled it off before them. It's like Appleton.
So there was a climbing gym in Appleton. When?
Yeah. We opened May of 95, closed when I quit guiding in 2007.
Holy cow.
Yeah. Believe it or not.
I had no idea.
But it was huge, 12,000 square feet. I don't build small. I want to punch everyone back a bit. So they'd have to try to outdo me to get notoriety. That was the same with guiding. I was always trying to do
this
first.
This is blowing my mind because I mostly lived in the Midwest when I wasn't a climber, and then I've climbed around since I've come back, and I would have definitely gone to this gym
to see what it was about.
Well, just had I known it was here, because I'm coming. I mean, or not.
Well,
here,
and when
but
did
in
your parents
Appleton.
move to Green Bay?
Well, they grew up there.
Oh, they're from Green
Bay
but then
originally. We
moved
away, and then they moved back.
Yeah.
After that, I mean, in the teens, 2000 teens. I don't remember exactly when, but I always visited up here. Always. I mean, because all my extended relatives, not up here. I'm sorry, we're sitting in Michigan, but up to Green Bay area. Like I was definitely a full. I mean, by 2000, I was like already. I mean,
yeah, you were into it big time.
Oh yeah, that was like past all my El Cap stuff. I would have totally gone to a gym.
I think
up there.
I started already hearing your name back then.
Yeah, so that's amazing.
Yeah, and it's funny. It took 18 years. So Odyssey just opened this last year. It took that many years for someone to pull up the mustard to try it again. I mean, we were so busy and everything, but I had pelvic issues from carrying huge packs my whole life. Because this whole time, remember that I'm doing all this goofy, kind of stupid stuff. I also had my Dairyland expeditions. I was noted for my adventure big wall stuff in the Bighorns.
Okay.
I was the only guide that had a permit for climbing. Knowles had one for like adventure camping.
Right.
But I was the only climbing guide ever in the 80s and 90s to 2000 that had a guiding permit for climbing in the Bighorns. And because I started climbing there in 79, 80, and I got to know the ranger ladies really well. So when I came back to them, with Dairyland Expeditions, they're like, she didn't retire. She was there 30 some years. Mary, I think her name is, I don't remember now. Sorry. there was also a Mary at Mount Adams who was nice enough. Like, I know you're from the Midwest, and we're going to have to do this sneakily because, people will complain that we're giving a Midwestern a permit on Adams. She did. So thank you, Mary. Mary Bean, I think it was, at the National Forest. I'm like, oh, you are the best. Because I had run out of alpine ice by the mid-90s, late 90s. All that beautiful coolers that I would teach people on, it was all gone. The glaciers that we camped on, snow all summer, gone. It's just giant talus now. So I saw global warming up front every time I was there. My courses were long, 10 days, because I taught them rescue everything. I wanted people leaving knowing they could just go right out to the Canadian Rockies or anywhere in the Rockies and climb something huge and feel super safe, because that's how I was taught.
Right. You did all that
so
first.
I wasn't telling them to be a guide. I just wanted to train them like they were going to be a guide.
Wow.
And so I enjoy it. I had 4 or 5 every summer, 10-dayers. So I was out there a lot. And those were 90+ pound packs because they're 10 days and that's a long ways in. And finally, it took me down, I think it was 2006. I was vacationing in Italy and I thought someone stabbed me in the back. I screamed a shriek and went down, and all these Italians are trying to lift me up, and I'm like, it's coming. I told Jude I had my climbing pack. The weather is horrible up in the mountains, so I couldn't do what I wanted to. So we were just vacationing, in Firenze, and that was on the Marco de Plazza or whatever, San Marco de Plazza, something down in the village. And so Jude ran back because she knew I had my med kit with a lot of stuff in it and ran it back. And by then everyone had left me alone and were just asking me. And I had practiced my Italian. So I was trying to go from Spanish to Italian. And, they were really nice to me. One guy, I think, was going to go grab ice or whatever. But by the time Jude's back, she had the heavy meds and I took them and I was able to get up and at least limp back to the hotel room. And it stayed hurting for 2 weeks. So when I came back and had it looked at, the spine specialist said, there's no cartilage or anything in the center of your iliac crest that holds your spine in place. I mean, you can still do what you do, but if you keep doing it all the time, you're going to be a 90+-year-old guy in like 5 years walking like that. I'm like, I don't want that. So that's why I shut everything down. 2006, we just like boom, boom, boom. I had already shut down Dairylander Expeditions because I knew I couldn't keep pushing because my hip was and pelvis was hurting all the time. It wasn't hips, it was just pelvis. So the iliac crest that holds your spine left and right, it was just riding onto my the whole nerve system for the piriformis and glute minimus and all that. So I had to stop guiding. I never dreamed I would stop guiding, and it ended it like that.
Could you still climb?
Oh, yeah. I could climb. Definitely. And I just kept climbing more for stretching, mainly,
So let's talk a little bit about the...
I keep wandering,
I know,
sorry.
It's fine. The scene up here,
yeah.
You're like discovering ice climbing here in the Midwest. I mean, not you specifically, but yeah, you guys are exploring all along Lake Superior, both sides.
Yeah, because that's another funny. So Sean Perron, who we all know here really well, he was guiding in Thunder Bay, and I had already got a work visa because I knew there's great stuff up there because one of my first partners from Indianapolis, we did a run around the whole lake for 3 weeks. It was like late February, early March, and just like we're hitting stuff left and right. And he was a big photographer too. So we had all these great pictures of us on all these ice. And then it was the mid to late 80s. I had seen Sean's stuff, not his guidebook or anything, but like in the McCullum cabin that they talk about up at Orient Bay, that did burn down in the mid, late 80s. But I knew he was stopping because I was renting it too. But we had never met. And then at the big ice fest, or whatever they called the winter fest in Minneapolis, St. Paul at Midwest Mountaineering, they always held this huge thing for sales for winter coming up in fall. And I finally said, I get asked by Minneapolis folks to show up there. One, I push my guiding stuff there. I wandered away to look at gear, and Jude had met this guy who was rifling through all my slides because I had a projector on the tabletop with a little screen behind, and it was showing pictures. And here he's rifling through as it goes past the slide tray thing. He's pulling up to see the dates, and he's like, "You're Paul Kuenn, eh?" And I'm like, "Are you Sean?" Because I had seen a picture of him or something. And it's like big hugs, like we finally met. And he goes, "You're predating me on a bunch of this stuff." I'm like, "I thought you had it all done on most of your stuff, you know?" He goes, No, now I have to change the book. I mean, it was just a little tight book, you know, so it's easy enough to change. But he put a fuss about it. But ever since then, we were like brothers. So, so I covered Lake Superior. 82 was a real big push. That's when we did 3 weeks nonstop, just back and forth, everything up on top, looking and searching. Because I didn't have a guidebook, but you could see that big stuff right from the road. So it's just a matter, and because there were no ice climbers, you had to punch hip deep through the snow. So it would take you all the day to do one damn climb, you know. But they're long climbs, you know, way over one rope length a lot of times. So I was in my element. My buddy that did this thing with me, he wasn't so much. He would go off in the evening smoking dope with someone he met. Whatever, and it would be a late start the next day. So it kind of peed me off, but he was willing to belay me up anything. That's all I wanted.
Well, I mean, let me ask you about then the like I said, the scene, because, you know, it's like there's cultures, and you know, you were a Western climber and then you came back here, and I think it's probably really, really unique, and the history show that I watched this morning like confirmed that it's its own flavor. I mean. You know, I tell people when they're like, "Yeah, you're going to Michigan to ice climb." I'm like, "Yeah, it's kind of this weird upper Midwest. It's like this kind of mix of sort of sledhead culture with ice climbing culture with like beer drinking farm boy culture, and like it's just kind of this really unique, I think, mix of like climbing culture up here." I mean, what do you have to say about like having traveled all around to come back here to this kind of unique scene?
It's definitely different because nobody tries to override each other.
Okay.
But that's typical in Midwest, right?
Right.
It's like, "Oh no, I can't be as good as you are."
Right.
You know, and so you just do your best, and then you find out no one touched what you did, and go, "Oh, that's kind of cool, but come on with me. Let's go do it again." You know? So yeah, like Eric Landman, who you watched this morning, I don't remember if we met at Devil's Lake or up here first, but that all led to the first Ice Fest. So when we met Mark Reich, I think Eric probably met him first, and then they said, "Hey, you got to meet PK because he's been up here doing so much stuff." You know, we said, "I think we can pull off," because we knew Sean he's really the first one with an Ice Fest. In that little McCollum cabin, I think he called it Ice Fest. So we kind of stole it from Sean, I think. But we had 8 or 10 people that first one.
What year about? Do you remember this?
It was Eric thinks it was 89 or 90 because Mark was the year before, like 80, 89, he was starting to type up that Great Lakes Ice Climbing newsletter.
Okay.
And that was our only thing that kept us together. But, you know, it was typed up, took them a couple of weeks, then it'd go out in the mail, you know. So you were always behind the times what was going on. But, you know, so when we had that first batch, it's like, this is cool. And I think we had Sean show slideshows, because the next year they wanted me to show my slideshow of like a South American trip I did, because I pulled some crazy stuff off down there too. But it was like suddenly 18 people, or 20, and we said, "This is out of hand."
What do you think the
and that's when we called Bill.
What do you think the gender ratio was?
always
18 dudes, or
it was only spouses or girlfriends.
Right.
So I love how it's changed. It's totally flipped. There's way more women out there now than we ever dreamed about. So, that wasn't happening back then.
No.
And like I told the group this morning or yesterday, seeing this really cool thing from the inner cities. And that really was started with my buddy down at the Turner's Club in Milwaukee, because he created an inner city thing to get the kids out of cars that were living out of cars and teach them how to climb, take them outdoors. And now that's spread to Detroit, Chicago. It's everywhere now. And I'm just it's incredible. I mean, I'm just like, you guys are so far advanced from what we were, sharing this kind of stuff. It was a old white man sport, ice climbing. Even rock climbing kind of was.
Yeah.
But at least there were a lot of women in rock climbing, but not ice climbing.
Not up
here. But because it was hot, it was brutal.
Yeah.
To place a Chenard ice cream would almost kill you. So why would you want to do that? It wasn't fun.
But I think that's the thing about it is, and I remember feeling this too, is that, I loved the uniqueness of rock climbing, like, because it was still very underground, and you were like, you go out west and it's less so. But then the ice climbing, when I started it, felt even more so, like it became even a smaller tribe. And then I was then I was thinking, I was in Colorado, so I was climbing Rocky Mountain National Park and things like that. You come back here, and it becomes like
one of my favorite climbs.
Yeah. The squid, I did it all mixed up back in the day. Like, that was when it was cutting edge. Now it's just some like silly slab.
I'm sure.
Yeah. It's just such a unique thing to have this a minuscule group of guys who all know each other. There's nobody out there doing anything on the slide.
It was a brotherhood.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt so close to
And it's funny because
Sean, Eric, the whole group, especially Mark, who unfortunately passed away when he was, so young. But I mean, the ice climbing group up here, because it wasn't in the mountains, so they didn't even know what climbing was, or rope climbing. So up here, you were just a bizarro guy if you show up with stuff like that and take it out of your car.
Is I grew up with deer hunting culture.
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't in it myself, but
but look how huge that was.
And my dad is a farm kid and still has deer camp, and
cool.
And that's kind of those pictures. It was like the clothes were different.
Yeah.
It's like, because it was the 80s, and so it's like all those pinks and purples and shit, where it would have been orange, right? So it's not too different, because like Blaze Orange, stands out too.
It does.
And those pictures just reminded me of pictures of deer camp. You know what I mean? And it kind of was like that same thing, because it's also like a lot of drinking.
They brought their own,
a lot of drinking involved, which is basically what deer camp is too.
Yeah.
So and that it's just the cultural thing is really fascinating.
Unfortunately, hunters still go out somewhat still tipsy, whereas climbers usually are cleaned up by the next morning.
Well, yeah, I don't know about that.
Sometimes.
Maybe the booze is out of their system.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we've been going for a while here, and I still want to hit a little bit about this Midwest ice climbing thing. I mean, did you spray it to your Western climbing buddies? I mean, did you guys try to kind of import, or were you just? It was just
not my. I mean, really, once it got to 18, and we called Bill and said, do you want to do something with this? And he's like, sure, right away. Because he was always a yes guy.
Right.
He never turned it down. He's
Bill Thompson.
Bill Thompson,
from the festival.
Yeah, wonderful guy.
Yeah, best.
Arnie didn't have a shop. Arnie was still working at the Air Force Base. Okay. But those two were inseparable. So we loved them both like brothers. And they were like, yeah, we'll take it on. But we just cared about Chicago, Detroit, Minnesota, just because we knew everybody there. Right. And I never mentioned it to anyone out west. Even when I moved out there, they'd say, well, where'd you learn? And I always would just say, oh, I learned to be a guide in North Cascades Alpine School.
Right.
Because they had plenty of their own ice, so why share? I mean, truly, Jude and I would ski out for years. Nobody in sight, ever.
Right.
And then to walk into Larry's office here at the Park Service and say, could I have a permit? I want a guide up here. And he's like, what the hell's that? And I showed him, I said, can you come out during a class and just see what I do? He was willing. And he goes, well, how do we go about this? And I'm like, well, you look for liability stuff in your treasure chest, and I'll give you my national park or my National Forest Service permit for the bighorns. Can you do something with that? And luckily I found someone else. I think it was a friend that worked for the Apostle Island, said we don't have ice climbing, but we have like extraordinary events type of liability forms. Right. So I'm like, cool, it's National Park Service. That'll help Larry. And so I gave him the stuff, and basically he just copied my Forest Service one because it did say climb, it mentioned that stuff in it. And he's like, just sign it. He says, I learned enough just watching you do what you were doing that day. I know you're safe and all that. And so, I not only had it to myself before guiding, I had it to myself for the next 15 years. Still, it took till 90, 91 when we started the Ice Fest that anyone knew about it.
Right.
So
no one knows about it still.
The late 70s,
if you don't live here.
The late 70s, 80s, I had it all to myself. And Jude belayed me on all those first hard things because I hardly ever had climber partners that wanted to drive up here. They were either from Minnesota or wherever, too far away. And Jude was a climber back then, and she didn't always follow me, especially it was overhanging, but she always belayed me no matter how damn cold it was. But back then, again, the ice went way out, so we never did anything from the top. I didn't know what any of this looked like from the top until we started to lose our winters.
Walk on the ice.
We just skied.
Yeah,
we always
ski
skied.
on the ice, yeah.
Yeah, we always skied out there. Sometimes there'd be really ruffled ice,
right.
But there's always snow that you could get out there. Maybe you had to go further out and then ski back in. But the ice was miles out. You could not see the end of it.
Right.
So we always had that back then. It wasn't until the late 90s, like 98, 99 was like the first year we suddenly don't see ice forming. Like, what's this?
Wow.
This is not good.
No.
And it just kept getting worse.
So what about I kind of want to ask you this earlier, but what about close calls? Like you kind of I went and did all this wild stuff. Up here,
I was just lucky.
Yeah.
I never had, big.
Right.
I would launch, if I step off of one icicle onto another. Luckily, never on Jude, or she would have just walked away, undid the belay and walked away. You're up to you to get up that now, But I launched some very large things that I thought were stable. I always leaned over, did the big stem, kicked, thinking, they're bomber, but I still launched a few. And luckily and sometimes I was already on them and took a long ride, but my screws are always high somewhere else before I took the step, so I never had one that I was worried about, so just knock wood that because I had partners that were so good that are gone now that, and it was Mother Nature against them. Wasn't them, wasn't their mistake. They were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And then at Array, I haven't had anything exciting happen to me for a long time. And my tools were luckily, it had just finally cooled down the last day we were there.
You're talking about last week.
Yeah. It just cooled down the day we had to leave. And I'm like, I want to lead because I was only able to lead the first day. So the whole middle 4 days weren't that much fun. So I went skiing and walking and bouldering in the sun. And then the last day was cold. I'm like, okay, there's one I'm eyeing up that no one touched under the bridge. 3 icicles all separated, but they were touching down and looked thick enough. But I should, I was always taught, like I said, from the breach, the book, don't go if you think it's too warm. And I should have had that on my brain because overnight it had dropped to 30 or 28. And by the time we got there, it's probably back up to 30. And that time had not solidified anything.
Not enough time.
Not enough. There's still, and so of course my tools were in a good spot. And as soon as I put my weight on that separated pillar, the whole thing just comes off. But luckily just leaned into the wall and didn't fall backwards or something. Because Jesse was, I saw his eyes get as big as mine because I looked down because it left my feet.
Right.
So I'm on my arms suddenly. And I'm like, damn it. But luckily it did stop just on a tippy toe. And I could get to the wall of rock on an overhanging rock and stem. And I was able to get up higher again because there was another little icicle nearby. So big stem. I got up over that. And then stupid me, I'm like, oh, that was rotten looking. I should have known better because when it came off, my legs were just getting poured on. So I knew there's way more water than I like running through that far out of the ice. But then it's like the next icicles, one was a new blue one that happened 2 weeks ago that nobody touched. It was perfect. And it was touching the darker one behind it. And I'm like, it should be all right. I think it's all right. So I keep going up and I'm like halfway up it. And now my tool and my I got a long reach. So it's almost at the top of the next hanging icicle. And it cracked right down exactly on the line between blue and dark ice. It just like cleaves. I'd never seen that happen before. I'm like, I am not trusting anything now. So I just down climbed, pulled my ice screws out as I down climbed. Luckily, that pillar that had fallen had leaned against the wall within my length. So I just put my tools in really down low by my feet and just lowered myself, skittering along a rock wall until my foot touched that pillar, And then just took one tool and jammed it in the top of the slushy part of that pillar and just got the hell out of there. There was one next to it that was a fun lead, but it wasn't what I wanted.
I mean, it sounds like your body's still working.
Yeah, other than my pelvis,
right?
I'm still, like yesterday, they're all doing that pumpy thing where they had to put a pack on and hang on. And I said, I really need to pop my back because that's the only way I can do it is do twisty things like I do in my basement. So, he has the tools all the way over the top of that wood board. So I put the pick ends at the very edge, like you would if you're ice climbing, or rock climbing, So the sharp points are right at the outside edge of that board. He's going, you're not going to hang on that. I'm like, oh, yeah, I am. And then I did a bunch of figure fours in front of everybody trying to pop my back, and it didn't pop. Oh. And I just quit. And then I walk away, and then everyone's like, do you always do that? And I'm like, well, that's kind of my training practice down in the basement. Because I have boards along the main beam, and I just do figure fours back and forth. And then I always try to do 100 chin-ups with my feet straight ahead of me. But I have to have a chair. I can't do them like a gymnast anymore. I got to put my foot on something out in front of me. So I try to stay in shape. But I got my buddy Saul, Professor Emeritus of Stevens Point, brilliant mind of biochemistry and stuff. I mean, he still climbs as hard as I do at 81. So I'm put to shame. I'm right like, on. I am not in good enough shape. But now I got really bad arthritis, probably from all the cold crap I did. Well, I know what it was called. They said by looking at the tissue, there's all these lumps that it was caused by an accident. And I'm like, yeah, because I caught a rock coming at my face with this hand and this hand within a year of each other. That had been when I moved out to Colorado. I soloed our heroes from Devil's Lake, the brothers, Paul Stettner brothers. Yep. Yeah. So I soloed their bottom route, and I was just about to climb. I was going to go do the original 5/8
on Longs.
Yeah, on Longs.
Okay, yeah, the Stettner's ledges.
Yeah,
into Alexander's chimney.
What's the 5/8 favorite climb just off from the casual route? I can't remember. But anyways, I was going to solo that, and then I hear screams from above and all this rock coming flying all over. And it was just my vision, peripheral vision was good. And I just put my hand up and I got slugged by a softball rock and it hurt hell. I couldn't climb for 2 weeks. that hand hurt bad. The very next year, I was at somewhere. It was in Rocky Mountain. Same thing. Big rock fall. Luckily, I hear a scream. So some climbers way up above saw it happening. By the time it's like shit flying all around me, I'm tucked under an overhang, and I put this hand up just out of a reflex. And it would have taken my head off. I mean, because of the way it hit my hand, and it was, again, a big softball-sized rock. So both hands to this day are kind of, I cannot squeeze anymore. I drop my beautiful cups my wife buys from a friend who does ceramics, and I'm just washing dishes, and it just comes right out of my hand. I'm like, I'm sorry. Broke another dish.
But you can hold an ice tool.
I can hold an ice tool forever, and I can crimp little tiny crimps. So Devil's Lake, right? That's made for me.
No rifle,
but
for
I
you.
can't.
No
I can't go in. I loved crack climbing.
Right.
I love the desert. I love cracks, and I can do it if it's like just no squeezing needed.
Like a bone lock.
But I can't squeeze.
Huh.
It's just really pitiful because that's my favorite kind of climbing, just one after another.
Right.
You know, it's painful getting older.
Let me ask you the last question. We're up at this fest. It's like bonkers compared to the 18 person or the 9 person.
Right. I know what Bill did with it is amazing.
You've got issues of warming up here. We're dealing with it at this fest this year. It's like all the ice fell down. It's gone for the moment. It's probably different up on the North Shore.
Not much,
but what about the future of climbing up here? Like, I imagine after this weekend, it's not crowded anymore, and it's like
right.
And some of those other places probably aren't still. Is there still like the experiences that you remember as far as people and community and things like that up here, or what's
we never had the community as part of this until the IMAX. When they put welcome IMAX, and suddenly the whole city was packed with people following the IMAX cruise. Suddenly,
wait, what?
Bill got his first thank you not until 2015 when that happened.
When what happened?
When the IMAX came out. So Conrad, he's told we have to do this. It must have been the IMAX for the 100 years of the national park.
Okay.
And they're talking to Conrad, and they're saying, we need you to ice climb. And he's like, we had no ice in the Rockies. It was a bad winter, dry and warm. And he goes, believe it or not, there's it's not called a national park. He had to warn them that.
Right.
It's a national shoreline, but it's the National Park Service that runs it. And they're like, Michigan? You want us to, we're out here to visit you and go ice climbing. And he's like, Michigan. So as soon as Conrad alerted Bill and everyone else, like, we have to arrange for this. And so up go the signs, welcome IMAX, and this crew comes here, and they're just like, can't believe what they see. Ice climbers, and that was the first time after all these years of Bill bringing in hundreds of people, eating and drinking, that he ever got thanked. That was sad. I was always mad at Munising for not helping. After that, suddenly, you want the high school or the old school?
Right.
Suddenly everything changed only because he brought a bunch of cash in.
Right.
It's not humanity driven at all.
Right.
It's always about greed. So anyways, yeah.
But what about the climbing?
But the fact
core
that
scene,
now that that's brought so many people in, I have so many new wonderful young friends and climbing buddies, his and hers, that just say, let's go climbing, PK. I'm like, oh, thank you. Because, I want to go climbing, but I don't have any friends my age anymore that want to do what I do. That's the problem. I still like the overhang and shit. That is an issue. And I feel comfortable, I test everything really, just not last week. I didn't test enough, obviously. Should have kicked harder. But anyways, this is just incredible what's happened. And Bill, I can't thank enough for what he took from us and just kept blowing it up bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, And I get to see old friends, well, not this year, but Wilford. We've known each other since Fort Collins days. Oh, he doesn't remember those days because we were both young and stupid. But, when he got to know me, when I was starting to guide and started to ask, do you want any gear? And I'd see him at Devil's Lake when he was out training all the gear shops. Suddenly we became brothers. It's like, oh, thanks, Mark. Because he'd always drop me off like brand new pair of boots or something. It's like, wow, that's really nice. Because none of the other dealers did that for us in the Midwest. So I was always thankful. And Mark came here every year. This is like the first year. So we really miss him. It's been a long time that he's been coming up here. But yeah, so I get to see friends, but it's these young folks. I mean, I never dreamed, right? Because it wasn't old man. So all those years of guiding, it was guys with a lot of money that could afford me because I was a guide, So I got a lot of freebies from them too, hotel room stays, and like one gentleman who I rock climbed for years, he would give me like 5 Swatch watches because he was like the CEO for Swiss watch company. Right. And I'd say, not 5. He goes, no, you need them because they're so shitty. They won't work after a week. So I'm giving you a whole pile. But I see them for this price in Chicago. He goes, yeah, don't buy them. Right. I'll give them to you. So, I mean, wonderful folks through all these years. And the ice climbing was such a part of it because we were alone up here. That family is just Munising. I mean, it has grown towards Marquette because now they got their own wall and stuff like that. But it was always just Munising. If it wasn't Orient Bay or Thunder Bay, we had this is all ours. But we were willing to share. And look what it's done. Yay! Yay, Bill. Go, Bill.
All right, folks, thanks for listening, and thanks to Paul for coming to the hotel room and sitting down. That was a blast. I could hardly contain him. A lot of joy coming out of that guy. A lot of joy around climbing. And if you want to hang out with Paul, come to the Michigan Ice Fest. I think he's doing some sort of clinic where you climb with his old shit. Hummingbird, ice tools. Those things were still in vogue when I started ice climbing. Which says how long ago that was. Foot fangs. I definitely had some foot fangs. So yeah, come to his clinic. Try to place those fucking ice screws while getting pumped out of your mind. Leashes, cutting circulation off to your hands. It will be so miserable, it'll be fun. Okay, it's late November. Almost Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to all you guys. And don't forget the Enormocast sponsors when it comes to gift giving this year. Sportiva, Yeti, Black Diamond. Get some coffee. That's a nice aromatic stocking stuffer, isn't it? Something romantic from Peter W. Gilroy. Whatever it is, don't forget to support the Enormocast this holiday season during your gift giving. Okay, I hope you ice climbers have your tools sharp. Hope you rock climbers are finding some respite indoors from the cold. And I hope everybody's checking their knots.
When you follow your bliss, and by bliss I mean the deep sense of being in it and doing what the push is out of your own existence, you follow that, and doors will open where you would not have thought there were going to be doors, and where there wouldn't be a door for anybody else. And there's something about the integrity of a life, and the world moves in and helps.